Going to take a look at a guitar that just came in. I'm going to do a triage on it, evaluation of it. It's actually not a triage if I just have one guitar to do. We'll take a look at it, and then we're going to revisit another guitar that I've been working on. I'm going to talk about a unique problem that I had with it. It actually has a couple problems, but there's one problem I'm going to talk about that's a rare issue for me. So, before I start, here's a bridge I'm working on, and this is what they look like before I drill the holes. I have very, very carefully marked where the pinholes go on here because this is a 2 1/4 inch bridge, and I use this tool. I've shown this in other videos, but might as well bring it up. This is a tool I got from Lutherie's Mercantile. This has been an extremely useful tool for me. It has 2 1/8 of an inch, 2 1/4, 5/16, and 3/8 inch holes all drilled out here, ready to go. You put your bridge blank in here, you mark it, and I have a couple of these things that I have preset for various measurements. The short one here is the measurement for the pinholes. This is how far I want the pinholes from the front of the bridge, and I put that on there and get me a pencil line drawn across there. Then I have this one, which is also set, never changes, and that's the distance that the curve is from the edge of the bridge. And so this one needs to be cut in a little bit more, and put that on there, and that's where the curve should be. So this one's got to come in a little bit more. I had to reshape the top on this one. And I have another measurement that I finally took. As many bridges take a lot of measurements to get just right, but that's what these pencil lines here are on the edges. That's the distance in to the first hole from the edge of the bridge into here. And so what I did is put this in here, and I use those lines with my marking tool here, and I use those to line up where the first mark goes. So like that. And I can see the line on here. This really helps me get that bridge where I want it. And when I finally got that measurement down from another bridge I just did the other day, that lets me put my end holes into marks accurately in from the edge. And what I do then is I mark the 2 E's very, very lightly. Put this punch in there and just tap it. Just barely tap it. Make a tiny mark, pull it out, and then I check my measurements to make sure that's where I want it. Is that the correct distance in from both edges? And are they, I use this one and line it back up on here again and make sure that it like bisects that hole. Bisects that hole. And when I'm happy with the 2 end E's, then I put it back into the jig, and I use this and I drop it on there, and I catch that hole that I just made right there. I catch that hole and tighten this down, and then I reach over here and I catch the other hole, and I'm good to go. And then I tap all the holes, and I tap all the holes pretty gently. I just want like a little bitty dimple in there. Take it back out again, get my calipers, and measure again. That's what it means by measure twice. You measure it, then you punch the hole, you measure it again. And then I measure each of the little dimples in here, make sure I've got them equal. I want to make sure that they're lined up on the pencil mark, and you better get the pencil mark right. But I also then take this one, the short one, and I run it over there, and I make sure every hole is bisected by that. And I have had to move, even though this jig is designed to be drilled through, so it's got holes on the top and the bottom, and I don't use it for that. Number one, I don't want to wear it out, and you're running the drill bit through there is going to wear it out, and it's going to get sloppy. And I don't use it like that. I like to check everything, and then I drill the holes on my drill press by hand. But if I have had this, so this will wobble just a little bit in here. You can see that tiny movement right there. It'll move just a little bit. So you want to be careful that it's not binding and it's dropping straight down on there. And I have had, once in a while, I've had it hit like a grain line or something, and twist itself off so that one of these holes ends up being out of line. And you can tell, you can sight down it like this, take a look at it visually, make sure those line up. I mean, I check it every possible way. Some people say, oh, that's redundant. Yeah, I like redundancy. I don't like to ruin bridges. So when I'm happy with these little bitty dimples on there, then I take a different punch. I don't use this punch to hit hard. It's just tap. I want that in sharp. Besides, I use just a standard awl over there, an ice awl, Drop that in there and then pow, hit it pretty good dent and take it over the drill press. So that's just a real quick overview on the process of making a bridge. And this one's going to have 2 1/4 inch spacing. I don't like to, set a bridge on an old bridge on there and drill the holes. It's just sloppy. I want to measure it with the calipers and make sure it's as precise and accurate as I can get it. In the end, if it looks good, it is good. So I just take a minute here and I visually look at that and make sure. And then one of these shoulders has to come in a little bit more. But I visually look at it, check, make sure that looks good, make sure that the holes look like they're good. Look at it this way, look at it that way, And then I leave it alone sometimes for a little bit. That's what that one's doing. So let me grab this guitar we're going to evaluate. And I like these evaluations, you guys seem to like them too, but I like them because they're really good for the customer. I can point out to the customer that here's your guitar, this is what it looks like, and these are the issues with it. I can show it to you. Customers have found it to be really useful, and I certainly like it too. So let me get this guitar, we'll plop it on the bench, and we will take a look at it. One more thing. Now that I finally am getting organized and starting to get everything straight, I've brought my system of folders back. And this is the customers, and I keep all the paperwork with them. So I've got the disclaimer in here. I've got most of our emails, the important emails. And again, I have a list of what I'm doing up here on my whiteboard. But I like this because sometimes I haven't written everything down on the whiteboard yet. And it's good to come back in here. Like I couldn't remember this guy. Did he want a 2 1/4 inch? What we were going to do. And I have it here. Good idea to put a new Madagascar rosewood bridge with a long vintage saddle and 2 1/4 spacing. Go for it. That's one that's actually on another guitar right there. But it's really handy to have these. And then when I come back from Los Alamos or whatever, and I have a limited amount of time in this shop, I can walk in here and I can pull the customer's folder, and I've got everything I need in there to get to work on it. I ran these in the old shop, and I haven't gotten organized. I've been setting papers over there, but now I finally got organized, and so I've got 5 guys here getting ready to run. You're going to hear some thunder. Let's get the guitar. Alright, our guitar today, I finally unpacked, is a D-35 383. So what's that put it, like about 75 or so? Man, this is in great shape. I don't think it's been played much. The back is in tremendous, look at that reflection. The back is in tremendously good shape. The finish is great. The binding looks great. The binding on the neck looks great. A lot of these D-35s get cracked binding and such. Just one little thing. I thought that. No, it's just a piece of dust. Yeah, man, this thing's in terrific shape. It's obviously had there's a little bit of a finish crack going on here, but nothing much. Pick guard's been replaced, as you can see, and this saddle has been replaced. Very first thing I see right off the bat, gonna need neck reset. The high E string is not even touching the saddle. high string is moving back and forth. There's absolutely no break angle on this. There we go. No break angle whatsoever on the high E. The bridge has been slotted, which is a good deal. Now, the first thing I noticed is that this bridge has been scooted back. Not the bridge has been scooted. The saddle has been scooted back. And that's one of the fixes that you can do for 70s to try to get the intonation right. Unfortunately, when I lay my magic stick on here, looks like Evo frets too. Yeah, this look good. It's still an eighth of an inch off. Let's see if I don't know if I can get this on the camera, but I'm gonna bring it up here, and maybe you can see the red mark right here. Red mark right there. And again, that's right past 12 and 7/8 of an inch. Not quite whatever the 16th would be in there, but not quite there. But it's just a little past the 12 and 7/8. Let's take a look. Where are you? It's hard for me to see it in the camera. You can see those marks here. This one's still an eighth of an inch off. So, you know, I mean, that's a good solution if you get it in the right place. But it's still not in the right place. And so it's still out of position. So, you know, if you want this guitar to play in tune, that's going to have to be scooted back. And there's just no other real way about it other than doing a completely new bridge and moving the pins back and moving the saddle back. And then you end up with the saddle right in the middle of the bridge, which I really can't stand. Let's just check the intonation real quick here. So, I mean, it's sharp. A little bit sharp. It's not perfect. It's not bad. It's better than it was when it was a stock 70s. When I look real close here, I can see the mark where they filled it in, and it just didn't get cut far enough back. What that really does here, it creates a very sharp break angle here on the low E. The low E is like diving in and right at the base of the saddle. So you got your saddle right here, and the low E is going in right there at the very base of the saddle. You don't get a nice break angle, and the string is like almost touching the saddle. It is. The string is actually touching the back of the saddle. But that's, you know, you're never going to get a good saddle height on that. That saddle is nothing. I bet it's 60 thousandths of an inch. And over here on the low E, high E, there's not even any saddle. And like I said, the string's not even touching the saddle. So the first thing this guitar is it's just gonna have to have that bridge scooted back, and there's no other way around it. So frets look really good. One more thing. Here's my gauge here. Yeah, got quite a bit of neck relief in the fingerboard. Thunder. It's going to cut loose here in a minute. I'm going to measure this. Got more than 12 thousandths of an inch of neck relief, which is twice as much as it ought to have. So, as pretty as those frets are, I'm going to have to pull some of them and reshape this fingerboard. Okay, 14 does not go. So 12 thousandths of an inch of neck relief. It's not terrible, but it's twice what it ought to be. The action on this looks like it's really low, and I probably should make note of that, because if he really wants it this low, I need to set it back into there. 76 thousandths of an inch. I mean, dudes, I run my electric guitars at 85 thousandths. That's lower than electric guitar. Lower than my electric guitars anyways. Here comes the rain. And let's see what the high E is. And even at 84 thousandths of an inch, a lot of people, some people think that's too low on electric guitar. 60 thousandths. 76 to 60 thousandths of an inch. That's a lot. That's really low. I took a lesson from Brad Davis, who used to play with Marty Stewart. He's a really great electric guitar player. And the first thing he did was look at my Telecaster and say, you got to raise the action on it. And, you know, he suggested like same as an acoustic guitar, 90 thousandths of an inch. So I've gone up a little bit, you know, I run about 86 and something like that. But for me just kind of playing around, I think 85, you know, 84, 85, 86. That's about as high as I wanted. If I really actually played electric guitar, yeah, I'd bump it up. So, an action's an action. So, alright, so this guitar, it's got the big rosewood bridge plate in it. And I sure hope I don't have any trouble with the finish on that. We're going to look at that on this other guitar here. But otherwise, this is a basic 70s. Here comes that rain. Let's see what the nut spacing looks like. This nut's been replaced. It looks good. Alright, between the E and the A, we've got 45 thousandths. Oh, I'm sorry, 245. Between the A and the D, we've got 255. Between the D and the G, we've got 265. Between the G and the B, we've got 265. And between the B and the E, we've got 280. So you've got a space of 255 to 280 in there. And I'll talk about that B7 chord in Beaumont Rag. Making that B7. I haven't tuned it up. This is not terrible. I mean, I can get my fingers in there. 255 is where I would set it. So it's not bad up there, but there's a lot of space in between the rest of the strings. And I would rather widen them all out and take advantage of that. Like that 280 is way too wide for the B and the E over there. And so I would keep the same edge spacing, but I would widen that up and give it a little bit more room in the bass strings and make it more even. It's very uneven right now, and I'm sure that's a center-to-center spacing, which I really don't like, edge-to-edge. So, hope this rain isn't too bad on the microphone. So, let's see. Alright, so this guitar, pretty much a full 70s, probably replace the tuners. I'd replace the nut. I'm going to need to pull maybe 5 frets, reshape the fingerboard over here. The bridge has got to scoot. I would recommend replacing the bridge plate if you want to get the sound out of it. And then I'm going to check all the back braces. I'll probably pull the popsicle brace. You know, I got to clear all this with the customer. But it's a really nice condition 70s, but it plays out of tune. And it can sound a whole lot better with that bridge plate replaced. So let's get the other guitar. Maybe. It's pouring. And I'll show you a problem. Here we go. I had to take a break. That rainstorm was making all kinds of noise. Anyway, we're back now. And so, we're going to look at this one here. This is a D-28. And this is one that I did in the triage video, in which I commented on the unusual color of the top. It's a very yellowish looking top, and I wondered if it might be Engelmann spruce instead of Sitka spruce. It also has 2 parallel cracks running up and down the top right there, and I commented on that because it's unusual to have 2 cracks like that. You'll get one, you know, from something or another, but to have 2 in pretty much the same spot. This one runs through the A string, this one runs through the little E, but, you know, that's pretty close. The way these tops are made, they're book matched, so that you just split a piece of wood like this and split it open and you lay them in there. It's like a book, see? If you have a weak grain line over here, you're going to have a weak grain line over here, and that explains one reason why the top splits are like that. So, when the top splits, it's due to usually humidity a lack of humidity. When wood shrinks, when wood gets dry, it shrinks. This is a box right here, so it can't go anywhere. So the wood shrinks and pow, and then it splits. The other reason could be an impact, but again, you're not going to get two impacts on the same spot, you see. So it's probably almost certainly a humidity, or it could just be a weak grain line in there that was just waiting to bust. If the top was not seasoned properly, not dried out, and put together wet, basically, not dried out as much as it should be, then it'll dry out over time, and that can cause cracks too. But point is, this guitar had two cracks right here. Now, I pulled the bridge plate out, and I have talked about this before, but removing the bridge plate is the single most risky thing that I do. I have a whole video on removing the bridge plate, and you should go watch that because I talk a lot about it, and you can see it getting done, and most people cringe when they see it, you think the popsicle brace was bad. I have a video on taking the popsicle brace out. You think that's bad, you should go watch the bridge plate video. It's not for the faint of heart. However, I've taken out hundreds of bridge plates now, and I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. I usually don't have any problems. About 1 in 30, maybe, I have an issue. I had that issue with this guitar. And basically, real quick, what you do is use heat to take that bridge plate out. Before I take it out, I get a big sponge like this one and get it really, really wet. And I put this in shape kind of like a bridge plate, you see. I put it on the inside of the guitar, turn the guitar upside down like this. That's pieces of bridge plate. Put it in there, and then I set it face down like this overnight. And I let it soak. I let that bridge plate soak with water. In fact, I squeeze it a little bit before I leave. Make sure. What I'm trying to do, what I am doing there, is that water will soak and hopefully soak through the bridge plate a little bit and soften the glue up a little bit so that when you do apply the heat, it's much more effective. The second thing it does is get some moisture into that plate so that when you heat it, the steam will rise up through there, and that also will loosen the glue much, much faster than just simply heating a dry bridge plate. And then the last thing it does is it makes sure that the guitar is humidified. Because like I just told you, if a guitar is dry, it wants to come apart. And so when you end up heating it, this glue line in the center that holds the two pieces together, that can get soft, and if the top wants to come apart, it'll come apart at that center seam. I alleviate a little bit of that by chiseling a groove in the bridge plate before I start so that there's no heat actually on the center seam. That's helped a lot. Okay, but the problem with this one, I did 5 bridge plates that morning. 5. Because I had a whole stack of them up here ready to go. So I set them all up as sponges. Left them sitting in here. Put them in the case and flipped it upside down, that kind of thing. I came in here and I pulled 5 bridge plates before I left for Los Alamos. This was the last one, and this was the one that gave me trouble. The bridge plate just did not want to come out. The bridge plate should actually smoke just a little bit when you heat it because, that's the moisture, the steam coming out and all that. This one didn't. Every time I tried to get it with the chisel, it just chip off the front. And that's always a sign that it's just not hot enough, or I'm not sure exactly what that is, to tell you the truth. But when it starts chipping off the front instead of prying off, watch the video, then something's not right. Something's going wrong here. I soaked it with more water. Anyway, and then I got it off. It started coming off, but it was real chippy. Broke off into lots of little pieces. Some of the plates that day I took off in one piece almost. This one, see, it just broke off. It was really chippy, really hard to get loose bridge plate. Anyway, what happened is I got heat damage right here. And the finish will bubble. And even though I put cooling pads over the top, damp wash rags that I put in the freezer, so they're cold, and I put them down here and they absorb heat. And again, I actually had 2 sets of wash rags in the freezer. So when I finished one guitar, I would go in and get a fresh cold one, frozen, put the other one in there and, alternate. So this had cold rags on it, all of that stuff. And in spite of that, when I got off into this section of the plate, which is the hardest section to get, it's the big part. The plate comes out like this, and there's a massive part over here. And a lot of times, especially when the plate is breaking, chipping and not pulling off like I want it to, you'll end up with a thin strip of rosewood over here, and it's tough to get loose. So when I pull the rag off, take it to check on it, because I check on it all the time. Are there any signs of bubbling? And sometimes you can catch it. Sometimes there'll be one bubble, and you can stop right then. You cool the thing down, and you just start all over again. You soak that thing with more water because there's less bridge plate to work with now, and you just start all over. But this one, I lifted it up, and there it was, man. There's just a field of bubbles right here, just like that. So, but again, there's things about this guitar that point me to what I would call a problem finish. They had a real thick ridge of finish in front of the bridge here. When I pulled the bridge off, there was a thick ridge of finish that actually had a hump in it like this, where the finish had scooted or bubbled up or something. And I rarely see that. I think that's a case of too much plasticizer in the lacquer, where it's plastic and rubbery. I'm not real sure. That's just my hypothesis, okay? So anyway, this one got bubbles in it. And so, God, the finish has come loose off of here. There's really no sink in it. Well, what I did, first thing I did was humidify the guitar a lot. I had to take off the Los Alamos. I put the sponge back in there, put it in a bag, and I humidified it hard, because what that does sometimes is makes those wood grains swell up again. And you could see not only had it bubbled, but it had sunk down in between the grain lines. So you had a corduroy effect over there. So you had it sunken in between the grain lines with little bubbles in between like that. So it was, I humidified it really hard, and the idea was to swell those wood grains up again and make them push the finish out. They did a little bit, and it came out, still had bumps in it. So what I do in that case, if it's bad, like this one was pretty bad, Fortunately, it didn't discolor too much, tan color. What I did after about a week of not trying to let it settle down and, stabilize, I use Beauty of Celluloid. It's lacquer melt. And I got a brush and brushed it on here, right along that spot right there. What it does is melts the lacquer and makes it reamalgate. It makes it melt, So it melted off the ridges and you brought the highs up a little bit. The problem with it is it's one of the most carcinogenic chemicals known to mankind. So I don't like to use it. I put it in here and had the fan running up there. I brushed it on and left. And then the next day I came in here and it still smelled like it. I could still smell it a little bit. So I left the door open because it was plenty humid out there. I left the fan on, blew the place out, and came back in that evening. And it looked pretty good then, So I let it sit. The lacquer takes a long time to dry. I let it sit again for another day. And then I came back out and level sanded it down. And, it looks pretty good. What I can see here is the term called chatoyance. Go look it up. Chatoyance. Chatoyance. And what that is the reflection of light off of a surface. Anytime the lacquer gets disturbed, like you spray new lacquer over it, it's going to have a different light reflection than the original lacquer. So it's going to reflect over this way, the other one reflects this way. So as you turn the guitar in the light like this, you can see that different light refraction. And I'm pretty sure if you've ever heard people say about, put a black light on it to see if it's been refinished, I'm pretty sure what they're doing is looking at the light refraction differences on there. I've done that with the black light, and you can definitely see it just stands out, little places that have been refinished. So this one came out really pretty good considering how bad it was. I'm going to attach pictures that I took, photograph pictures, so that you can see what I had to start with. And, it was hard to photograph. lithograph, but here's what the top looks like right there. You can see a little bit of, in the light, I can see it now that I'm holding it up. You can see a little bit of smear right there, and that actually is water left over from when I was wet sanding it. I need to come back and do it again, because when you're wet sanding this thing, man, the last thing you want to do is bust through the finish there. So I got it down very cautiously, but what you're seeing on that flat surface is actually where the water was. And I'm not done with it. I'm going to come back to it and do it some more. Polish it some more. But I want to show you how level I actually got that. I'm going to turn it around in the light and take a look at stuff. It's kind of fun. So your spot is right here. Well, actually, you can see a little bit of a red mark here. I'm not sure what the red mark is from. I didn't use a pin or anything, and it's bleeding red right here for some reason. Maybe the guitar's bleeding. That's a strange thing. But it's right in front of that red mark right there. There you go. I had it in the light right there a second ago. Anyway, I mean, it looks pretty decent. I think if I wouldn't have said anything, I told the owner what happened, because I always try to be upfront about this thing. I don't want to hide anything, and I want him to know, do you want me to try to fix it? Because try is the operative word here. Sometimes it doesn't go right, I've dealt with finish problems before, and I used to work with a guy, I used to know a guy who does professional lacquer painting. He paints pictures on more inexpensive guitars, but like those cowboy scenes and things, he does that with lacquer. He is an absolute pro when it comes to lacquer. And he has sent me, I am not a pro in lacquer, but sometimes you gotta ask for help. And he sent me this guitar where I think it was a spot up here or something, where it had burned through, and every time he tried to re-lacquer it, the lacquer would just shoot away from it. It probably had silicone or something in there. The lacquer would just shoot away, and then you'd sand it back down, and the spot would get bigger and bigger. And man, he was just tearing his hair out. And I am fairly experienced with shellac, doing French polish and stuff, especially back then. I'd worked with shellac a fair amount. So he said, "Do you want to try putting a shellac finish down for me, and then we'll spray lacquer over that?" So I said, "Sure, make sure it's, customer's good with all that, because we might get even worse on this thing." Long story short, I was able to get some shellac down, and we were able to get a finish over it and did a reasonably good job of finishing that again. But again, the Sartorius, you could turn it around in the light, and you could totally see that spot. So finish repairs are just a nasty business. That happens once in a while when you do a bridge plate. And again, I've gotten a lot better at it, and I haven't had one. It's not even a matter of being better. It's a matter of things just happen sometimes. I mean, it's in my disclaimer. It's the very first line in my disclaimer. Accidents happen. And they do. So, it's not a matter of being careful. I was just as careful with this as I was all the other 4 guitars. And this is the first time I've had one bubble in quite a long time. I had one a while back, get like 2 bubbles on it. And while it was still hot, I immediately took a piece of wood and pressed it down. And I had just 2 tiny little pinpricks that were insignificant because that top was, a wreck already. But that's the first time I've had one bubble like that in quite a while. So I just want to make everybody, again, there are problems in this business. And a lot of times you only get to see the videos of the things when they go right. Lynn Dudenbosch told me, he said, Lutherie is French word for a guy who can fix his own mistakes. That wasn't the exact words he used, but you get the gist of it. All right, so the other thing I'm doing on this guitar now that we've examined the bridge plate fiasco, I am fixing the cracks. I'm working on the cracks right here. very, very open cracks, and they are not responding to humidity very well. Most cracks, when you give it any kind of humidity, they just slam shut, and then you can put some glue in there, and you're done. I am humidifying this thing hard with this heavy sponge right here, and I'm setting it on top of just a baggie like this. I'm setting it on top of that inside the guitar and leaving it well till the cracks close up. I got this one done pretty good. I got it closed. I smeared some glue in there. I put cleats in there. Let me grab a cleat. This is the kind of cleat that I'm using on this guitar. It's spruce. It's really thin. It is, in fact, 60 thousandths of an inch thin, which is as thin as I can sand it, basically. The grain is running this way. See the grain? The grain is running perpendicular across here. And what I'm doing is I'm making a bridge of a cleat like this. This is a much bigger cleat than I would use most of the time. See that? That's what it looks like, okay? What I'm trying to do is give a nice, good surface of glue across here. So I'm trying to glue quite a bit at the top, because I don't want to have a thin cleat in there that then separates more grain lines. You can cleat a little tiny cleat and then the breaks on the side of it. We don't want that to happen. So I am using a fairly large cleat. It's thin and it's beveled on all four sides as a stress relief. It's going to go right on there and make a broad span across there, and that should hold that top closed. I'm putting two cleats in there. Of course, there's braces going across here too. They help. But I'm putting a cleat here. I'm putting a cleat back here. And then I'm putting the same thing over here on this side. Normally, I don't really deal with cracks all that much, especially this B-string crack. I almost never worry about the B-string crack. I don't cleat into there because this one's got a cleat. Yeah, I talked about that, didn't I? This one's got a cleat, much bigger cleat, ugly cleat than mine does. And I rarely cleat that B-string crack because you fix the problem. The problem is the pickguard shrinking. And when you alleviate the problem, then the crack isn't really going to go anywhere. It's not in a stressed area, not like this is back here on the top, which flexes. So I really don't do cleats that much. But when I do, I want to do it cleatable, One of these days I'll show you, I'll make a video of my mandolin, my elk horn mandolin, which is a special mandolin to me. And after I'd had it for about 2 years, the top split. And I had to come up with a way to fix that I thought was pretty clever. Someday I'll do a video on that. And it's still holding together. I think it's 7-8 years now. So, but I had an interesting problem on that one. So, all right, I'm going to get another cleat and glue in this guitar and let it sit. And this is the bridge plate scoot that's in progress. Still got the tape on here. I haven't cleaned it up a lot at all. This guitar gets the bridge that we looked at in the beginning of this video. This bridge, this ebony bridge, goes on this guitar. It's going to go on there. It's going to get a new bridge. So, it's also getting a Southeast Asian rosewood bridge plate. We talked about it, and the owner said he would like to try one. So, all right, cool. We'll put one in there and see what we got here. Get a new pick guard, obviously. So, I'm going to go throw a cleat in this and clamp it up and let it sit for the night. All right. Hope you learned something. Leave me some comments if you want to. See you later.